The smell of burnt coffee and exhaust fumes was so familiar now that I barely noticed it anymore. That's what 12-hour shifts as a trauma nurse at Manhattan Presbyterian did to you. Dulled your senses to everything except the immediate crisis in front of you. I pushed through the revolving doors, my feet already aching in anticipation of the night ahead. The cold October wind bit through my scrubs, and I regretted not bringing a warmer jacket. But warmer jackets cost money I didn't have. My shift started at 7, but I always arrived 15 minutes early. Not out of dedication, but because charge nurse Patricia Brennan had a legendary temper and zero tolerance for tardiness. She'd made an example of Jenny Martinez last month, assigning her to bedpan duty for a week after she'd been 3 minutes late. 3 minutes. I couldn't afford to give her any ammunition. The employee locker room was a cramped, windowless space in the hospital's basement, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that made everyone look vaguely unwell. I spun my combination lock with practiced efficiency, yanked open the dented metal door, and exchanged my civilian clothes for the uniform that had become like a second skin. Blue scrubs, comfortable sneakers with good arch support, hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. The same transformation I'd performed hundreds of times before. "You look like hell," came a familiar voice from behind me. I turned to find my closest thing to a work friend, Marcus Chen, already in his scrubs and holding 2 paper cups of what the hospital cafeteria generously called coffee. "Thanks, Marcus. You really know how to make a girl feel special," I said, accepting the cup he offered. The coffee was lukewarm and tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the previous administration, but caffeine was caffeine. "I'm serious, Sarah. When's the last time you got a full night's sleep?" His concern was genuine, his dark eyes studying my face with the same analytical attention he brought to patient charts. I took a sip of the terrible coffee, buying time to formulate an answer that wouldn't invite more questions. "I sleep fine. Just been picking up extra shifts. Extra shifts on top of your regular 50 hours a week." It wasn't a question. Marcus had been at Manhattan Presbyterian for 5 years. 3 years longer than me, and he'd developed an almost supernatural ability to read the staff schedule. "Sarah, you're going to burn out." "I'm fine," I insisted, closing my locker with more force than necessary. "Really, I just need the money." He opened his mouth to press the issue, but the overhead speaker crackled to life with the evening announcements, mercifully cutting off the conversation. We headed toward the emergency department together, falling into the familiar rhythm of pre-shift preparation. The ER was already chaos. Friday nights always were. A drunk driver had wrapped his car around a telephone pole on Amsterdam Avenue, bringing in 3 trauma patients. A domestic dispute in Harlem had resulted in multiple stab wounds. And somewhere in the waiting room, a child with a mysterious fever was screaming at a pitch that could shatter glass. "Michaels, Martinez, you're on Trauma Bay 3, Patricia barked the moment she spotted us. She was a woman in her mid-50s, who'd probably been born wearing nurse's scrubs and a disapproving expression. "GSW to the abdomen, male, late 20s. Paramedics are bringing him in now. Gunshot wound." My stomach clenched the way it always did at the start of a critical case, but my hands remained steady as I moved toward the trauma bay. Fear was fine. Fear kept you sharp. It was panic that killed patients. The ambulance bay doors burst open, and the paramedics wheeled in a gurney at a near run. The patient was conscious, which was a good sign, but the amount of blood soaking through the pressure dressings was decidedly not. He was young, probably younger than me, with dark hair and expensive-looking clothes now ruined with crimson stains. 28-year-old male, single GSW to the left upper quadrant. The lead paramedic rattled off as we transferred the patient to our trauma bed. Vitals are stable but dropping. Blood pressure 90/60, heart rate 120, respirations 24 and shallow. He's lost a lot of blood. I moved on autopilot, years of training taking over. IV lines, blood draws, monitors, oxygen. Marcus worked beside me with the same practiced efficiency. This was where we excelled. in the midst of crisis, where there was no time to think about rent payments or failed relationships or the crushing weight of a life that never quite worked out the way you'd planned. Dr. Amanda Reeves arrived within minutes, her short gray hair still perfect despite the late hour. She was one of the best trauma surgeons in the city, and she knew it. "Talk to me," she commanded, already examining the wound. "Single entry, no exit wound. Possible liver involvement. He's type O negative. We've got 4 units of blood ready to go," I reported, my voice steady and professional despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. The patient's eyes found mine, dark and intense, even through the haze of pain. "Don't let me die," he managed to say, his voice rough but clear. "Please." "We're going to take care of you," I told him. The automatic reassurance nurses gave 100 times a day. But something about his gaze, the desperation in it, the intelligence behind the pain, made the words feel more personal, more like a promise. "I need to know," he said, his hand suddenly gripping my wrist with surprising strength for someone who'd been shot. "I need to know who did this." "Sir, you need to calm down and let us work," Dr. Reeves said firmly. "Sarah, give him 2 of morphine." But his grip didn't loosen. "The man who shot me. Dark coat, scar on his left cheek. Did they catch him?" I glanced at the paramedics, who shook their heads. "We didn't see anyone, buddy. You were alone in that alley when we found you." Something flickered across the patient's face. Fear? Anger? I couldn't quite tell. His grip on my wrist tightened almost painfully before Dr. Reeves nodded at Marcus, who gently but firmly pried the man's fingers loose. "Morphine, Sarah. Now." I administered the pain medication, watching as the tension in his body gradually eased. But his eyes remained locked on mine until the drug pulled him under, that same intense gaze that seemed to be trying to communicate something I couldn't quite understand. "Let's get him to OR 2, Dr. Reeves announced. "This one's going to be tricky. Possible splenic injury, probable liver laceration. Sarah, you're with me." It was an honor to be chosen to assist in surgery, but also a guarantee that my already long shift would stretch even longer. I followed the gurney toward the surgical wing, mentally calculating how much overtime this would add to my next paycheck. Every hour mattered when you were 3 months behind on rent and the landlord had started leaving increasingly threatening notes on your door. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of intense focus, of handing Dr. Reeves the exact instrument she needed before she even asked for it, of monitoring vitals and adjusting medications and willing this stranger to live. And he did live. Against odds that had Marcus quietly betting otherwise, the patient stabilized. The bullet had miraculously missed all major blood vessels, and while he'd lost his spleen and sustained some liver damage, he would recover. "Good work, Michaels," Dr. Reeves said as we finished closing. It was the closest thing to a compliment she ever gave. "Make sure he's settled in ICU, then you can clock out. You've earned it." I accompanied the patient, still unconscious from anesthesia, to the intensive care unit on the 4th floor. The ICU was quieter than the ER, but no less intense. Every beep and alarm carried life or death significance. I helped the ICU nurses get him settled, checking his lines one final time, noting his vitals in the chart. "You saved my life tonight." The voice, rough and still thick with drugs, startled me. I'd thought he was still under. I turned to find him watching me, those same dark eyes now clearer, more focused. "Dr. Reeves saved your life," I corrected gently. "I just assisted. No." He shook his head slightly, wincing at the movement. "You made a promise. You kept it." I remembered then, his desperate plea in the trauma bay, my automatic reassurance. "It's my job," I said, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. "What's your name?" I hesitated. There was something about him that set off warning bells in the back of my mind. Maybe it was the expensive watch still on his wrist despite the blood loss and surgery. Maybe it was the way he'd gripped my arm in the trauma bay, desperate to know about his attacker. Maybe it was just years of working in an ER teaching me that people didn't get shot in alleyways for no reason. Sarah, I said finally. Sarah Michaels. Sebastian Cross. He tried to extend his hand before remembering the IV lines. A wry smile crossed his face. Thank you, Sarah Michaels. I owe you my life. You owe the surgical team your life, I corrected again. But you're welcome. Now get some rest. Your body needs to heal. I turned to leave, eager to finish my charting and clock out. My apartment in Queens, small, shabby, but mercifully my own, was calling to me. But his voice stopped me. The man who shot me. He'll come back. I turned slowly. Then you should tell the police. There are 2 officers waiting outside to take your statement. The police can't help me. His eyes held mine, and I saw something in them that made my blood run cold. Not fear, certainty. No one can. This isn't over. Mr. Cross, I really think... You should be careful, Sarah Michaels. You saved the wrong person tonight. Before I could respond, before I could even process the strange warning, his eyes drifted closed again, the medication pulling him back under. I stood there for a long moment, my heart beating faster than it should. The wrong person. What did that mean? Weird one, huh? One of the ICU nurses, Katie Rodriguez, appeared at my elbow. She'd been working at Manhattan Presbyterian even longer than Marcus. Rich boy playing gangster, probably. See it all the time. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Sebastian Cross was something more than a rich kid in the wrong place at the wrong time. There had been something in his eyes, something that spoke of real danger, real power, something that made his warning feel less like paranoid rambling and more like genuine prophecy. I finished my charting in a daze, my mind replaying the evening's events, the way he'd gripped my wrist, the desperation in his plea, the certainty in his warning. By the time I clocked out, it was nearly 3 a.m. The subway ride back to Queens was a blur of exhaustion and unease. My building was a 5-story walk-up in Astoria, the kind of place where the front door lock had been broken for 6 months, and the super only appeared when you stopped paying rent. I climbed the stairs slowly, my feet screaming protest with each step. 4th floor, always the 4th floor, never the convenient 2nd floor or manageable 3rd. The envelope was taped to my door. I knew what it was before I even touched it. 3rd notice. Final warning before eviction proceedings begin. The landlord's increasingly hostile tone bled through the formal legal language. I had 2 weeks to come up with 3 months' rent plus late fees. Approximately $7,000 I didn't have. I let myself into my apartment, the single room that served as bedroom, living room, and dining room all in one. The bathroom was the size of a closet, the kitchen little more than a hot plate and a mini fridge. But it was mine. Or it had been mine. Now it was just another thing I was losing. I collapsed onto my second-hand futon without bothering to change out of my scrubs. The ceiling had a water stain shaped vaguely like a bird. I'd spent countless sleepless nights staring at that stain, trying to figure out how my life had gone so wrong. Medical school debt. That was the short answer. $240,000 in student loans with interest rates that made the balance grow faster than I could pay it down. I'd thought becoming a nurse would be my ticket to stability, to a life where I didn't have to constantly worry about money. Instead, it had been a trap. The debt controlled everything. Where I lived, what I ate, whether I could afford to get sick myself. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. You okay? You seemed off tonight. I typed back. Just tired. See you tomorrow. But I wasn't okay. Something about Sebastian Cross's warning had unsettled me in a way I couldn't quite explain. You saved the wrong person tonight. As if saving a life could ever be wrong. As if there were right and wrong people to save. As if I had any choice in the matter. I closed my eyes, willing sleep to come. But all I could see was his face, pale from blood loss, but still handsome in a sharp, dangerous way. His dark eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that had felt almost physical, and his hand on my wrist, gripped tight enough to bruise, as if he were drowning, and I was the only thing keeping him afloat. Outside my window, sirens wailed in the distance, the eternal soundtrack of New York City. I'd lived here for 3 years, worked at Manhattan Presbyterian for 2, and I'd never felt more alone, more trapped, more aware that one wrong move, one missed shift, one unexpected expense could send me spiraling into homelessness. The irony wasn't lost on me. I saved lives for a living, but I couldn't save myself. I must have finally fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through my window and my phone was ringing. I grabbed it groggily, squinting at the screen. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Sarah Michaels? The voice was professional, female, with the clipped efficiency of someone used to being obeyed. Yes, who is this? My name is Victoria Chen. I represent Sebastian Cross. He's asked me to contact you regarding an important matter. Would you be available to meet this afternoon? I sat up, suddenly very awake. I'm sorry, what? Why would Mr. Cross need to meet with me? I was just his nurse. Mr. Cross has a proposition for you, Miss Michaels, one that I think you'll find very much worth your time. Could you meet us at 2 p.m. today? I'll send you the address. I work tonight. I need to sleep. This will take less than an hour, I promise. And Miss Michaels? Her voice softened slightly. Mr. Cross mentioned you're having some financial difficulties. This proposition could solve those problems, permanently. My mouth went dry. How did he know about my financial situation? I hadn't mentioned anything to him. Unless, I don't understand. 2 p.m., Miss Michaels. I've already sent the address to your phone. Please don't be late. Mr. Cross doesn't like to be kept waiting. She hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone in disbelief as a text message appeared with an address in Midtown. A very expensive address, if I was reading the cross streets correctly. I should ignore it. Should block the number and forget this whole strange interaction. Sebastian Cross was a patient, nothing more. Whatever proposition he had couldn't be legitimate if it came with veiled threats about being punctual. But then I looked at the eviction notice on my counter. $7,000. 2 weeks. Against my better judgment, against every instinct screaming that this was a mistake, I started getting ready to meet Sebastian Cross. The address Victoria Chen had sent led me to a building in Midtown that made my breath catch. 60 stories of glass and steel rising into the Manhattan skyline like a monument to excess. The kind of place where doormen wore better suits than most CEOs, and the lobby looked like it had been designed by someone who thought marble and gold leaf showed restraint. I stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, seriously considering turning around and going home. Whatever Sebastian Cross wanted, it couldn't be good. People who lived in buildings like this didn't have propositions for broke nurses unless something illegal was involved. But $7,000. 2 weeks. I pushed through the revolving doors into a lobby that smelled like money. Some combination of expensive cologne, fresh flowers, and privilege. The security desk was manned by 2 guards who looked like they moonlighted as Secret Service agents. I'm here to see Sebastian Cross, I said, my voice sounding small and uncertain in the vast space. I have an appointment at 2. The older of the 2 guards consulted his computer screen, then nodded. Miss Michaels, you're expected. Penthouse level. Elevator bank to your right. The elevator was wood-paneled and had a small chandelier hanging from its ceiling. A chandelier in an elevator. I watched the numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, until finally reaching P for penthouse. The doors opened directly into an apartment that redefined every concept I'd ever had of luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan that made the city look like a toy model. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive fabrics, artfully arranged to look casual despite probably costing more than I made in a year. Original artwork hung on the walls, pieces I recognized from museum visits, or at least expensive reproductions of them. Miss Michaels, thank you for coming. Victoria Chen materialized from a side room. She was in her early 40s, I guessed, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost what I paid for 3 months of rent. Her black hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes were sharp with intelligence. Mr. Cross is just finishing a phone call. Please, have a seat. She gestured to a cream-colored sofa that looked too pristine to actually sit on. I perched on the edge, hyper-aware of my jeans and clearance rack sweater in this space designed for people who wore designer labels, as casually as I wore scrubs. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Victoria's hospitality was professional, but not warm. I'm fine. Thank you. My hands were shaking slightly. I clasped them together in my lap. Ms. Chen, can you tell me what this is about? Mr. Cross said something last night that was concerning. And now this. I think it's better if Mr. Cross explains personally. She settled into a chair across from me, crossing her legs with precise elegance. But I can tell you that he's very grateful for what you did. You saved his life. I was doing my job. Nevertheless, she studied me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Mr. Cross is a man who believes in repaying his debts. All of them. Before I could ask what that meant, a door opened, and Sebastian Cross entered the room. He moved slowly, one hand pressed against his side where the surgical incision was still healing. He'd refused to stay in the hospital more than 24 hours despite Dr. Reeves's protests. Against medical advice, his discharge papers had read. He looked different outside the trauma bay. Still pale from blood loss, but commanding in a way that the hospital gown and IV lines had hidden. He wore dark slacks and a white dress shirt, open at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The casualness of the outfit somehow made him more intimidating, not less. Sarah. He said my name like we were old friends. Thank you for coming. Mr. Cross. I stood, suddenly unsure of the protocol. Did you shake hands with someone you'd helped save? Someone who'd warned you that you'd saved the wrong person? You should still be resting. That surgery was major. A slight smile crossed his face. Are you always this concerned about your patient's recovery? Or am I special? I'm concerned about any patient who checks himself out against medical advice less than a day after major abdominal surgery. I sounded prim, like Patricia in her worst moods. But I couldn't help it. The whole situation had me off balance. Fair enough. He moved to sit in the chair beside Victoria's, wincing slightly at the movement. Please, sit. We have things to discuss. I lowered myself back onto the sofa, my entire body tense. Mr. Cross, I don't understand why I'm here. If you wanted to thank me, you could have sent flowers to the hospital. This seems... I gestured vaguely at the penthouse around us. Excessive. You're 3 months behind on rent, he said, as casually as if commenting on the weather. Your landlord has started eviction proceedings. You owe approximately $7,000, plus late fees. The blood drained from my face. How do you know that? You also have $240,000 in student loan debt. Your interest rate is 8.5%, which means you're paying nearly $20,000 a year just in interest. At your current salary and expense rate, you'll never pay it off. You'll be making minimum payments until you're 50, maybe 60. I stood up, anger overriding my fear. That's private information. You had no right. Sit down, Sarah. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that made me obey before I even realized I was moving. I'm not trying to intimidate you. I'm trying to help you understand your situation. I understand my situation perfectly well. Thank you. My voice shook with rage and humiliation. What I don't understand is why some stranger is investigating my finances. Because I owe you my life, Sebastian said simply. And I always pay my debts. He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. I have a proposition for you, Sarah Michaels. Hear me out. If you don't like it, you can walk away right now, and I'll never contact you again. But if you're smart, and I think you are, you'll listen. I should have left, should have told him where to shove his proposition and walked out with what little dignity I had left. But curiosity held me frozen, along with that treacherous voice in my head whispering about $7,000 in 2 weeks. I'm listening. Good. He settled back in his chair, his posture relaxing slightly. I need a private nurse, someone with trauma training, someone who can handle emergency situations, someone discreet. There are private nursing services, agencies that specialize in... I don't want an agency. I want you. He held up a hand to forestall my objection. Let me finish. The position would be live-in. You'd have your own suite here in the penthouse. Your job would be to ensure my recovery from this injury and to be available for any future medical needs. Future medical needs? I repeated slowly. You mean you expect to be shot again? I operate in a dangerous industry, he said, not quite answering. Medical emergencies are not uncommon. What industry? Import and export, international trade. The specifics aren't important. They were absolutely important, but I let it slide for the moment. And you expect these medical emergencies to happen here? In your penthouse? Where there's no equipment, no backup, no... There's a fully equipped medical suite on the floor below this one, Victoria interjected. State-of-the-art equipment, full pharmacy, everything you might need for emergency care short of open surgery. I stared at her. You have a private hospital in your building. Several of my business associates have. Similar arrangements, Sebastian said. It's not as unusual as you might think. It was completely unusual. It was insane. And it was also making a terrible kind of sense. Sebastian Cross wasn't some rich kid playing gangster, as Katie had suggested. He was actually a gangster. Or something close to it. Someone who couldn't go to regular hospitals when he got shot, because that involved police reports and questions he didn't want to answer. I can't, I said quietly. I have a job, responsibilities. You hate your job. He said it matter-of-factly, like an established truth. You're buried in debt, 3 months from eviction, and working yourself into an early grave. What responsibilities do you have that outweigh your own survival? I wanted to argue, to list all the reasons why I couldn't possibly accept this insane offer. But the words stuck in my throat because he was right. I did hate my job. Not the nursing. I loved the actual work of caring for patients. But the hospital bureaucracy, Patricia's petty tyranny, the soul-crushing awareness that no matter how many extra shifts I picked up, I would never get ahead, never be anything but broke and exhausted, and one emergency away from financial ruin. The salary is $250,000 a year, Victoria said into my silence, plus room and board, health insurance, and a signing bonus that would cover your immediate debts. All of them. $250,000. I made $63,000 at Manhattan Presbyterian. This was offering me 4 times that. To be a private nurse for a man who'd been shot in an alley and expected it to happen again. Why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You could hire anyone. Someone with more experience. Someone who... Because you kept your promise. Sebastian's eyes held mine. In that trauma bay, when I asked you not to let me die, you promised you wouldn't. And you kept that promise, even though you had no reason to. Even though I was just another gunshot victim in a city full of them. He paused. Loyalty is rare, Sarah. I value it above almost anything else. This is crazy, I said, but the conviction had gone out of my voice. I don't even know you. You'll get to know me. That's part of the arrangement. He gestured around the penthouse. This will be your home. We'll be living in close quarters. You'll see me at my worst and my best. There are no illusions here about what this is. And what is this exactly? A business arrangement. You provide medical care and discretion. I provide financial security and protection. Protection. The word hung in the air between us. Protection from what? For the first time, Sebastian hesitated. He exchanged a glance with Victoria, some silent communication passing between them. I wasn't shot at random, he said finally. Someone wants me dead. Until I find out who and neutralize the threat, anyone close to me is potentially in danger. Then why would I possibly agree to this? I demanded. You're asking me to move into the home of someone with a target on his back. That's not protection. That's suicide. You'll be safer here than in your fourth-floor walk-up in Astoria with a broken front lock, he said calmly. This building has 24-hour security, armed guards, bulletproof windows, and my personal protection extends to everyone in my household. Your household. The word tasted strange in my mouth. You make it sound like I'd be staff, like a servant. You'd be an employee, a highly compensated one. Sebastian leaned forward again, his intensity returning. Sarah, I'm not going to pretend this is a normal job offer. It's not, but it's real and it's legitimate. You'd have a contract, benefits, everything legal and above board. Except the part where I'd be treating gunshot wounds in a private medical suite instead of a hospital, I pointed out. Except that, he acknowledged. But you'd also have your debts paid off, a place to live, financial security for the first time since medical school. Isn't that worth something? It was worth everything. That was the problem. He was offering me salvation from a debt spiral I'd been drowning in for years, a way out of the crushing poverty that had become my normal. And all I had to do was sell my soul to the devil in a designer penthouse. I need time to think about it, I said. Though even as I spoke, I knew what my answer would be. You didn't turn down opportunities like this when you were 3 months from homelessness. You have 24 hours. Victoria pulled a business card from her jacket pocket and handed it to me. Call me by this time tomorrow with your decision. If you say yes, we'll handle everything. Packing your apartment, terminating your lease, giving notice at the hospital. You won't have to do anything except show up. And if I say no, then we'll never contact you again, Sebastian said. Your debts are your own, and your life continues as it was. No hard feelings. I took the card with numb fingers. This couldn't be real. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like me. Women drowning in student debt and late rent notices didn't get rescued by mysterious, wealthy criminals offering $250,000 salaries. Except apparently they did. I did. I'll call you tomorrow, I managed to say. Thank you for the offer. Thank you for considering it. Sebastian stood with obvious effort, his hand going back to his side. Victoria will see you out. The elevator ride down felt surreal, like I was floating rather than descending. Victoria had given me a thick folder containing details about the position. Job description, salary breakdown, benefits package, even floor plans of the penthouse showing where my suite would be. It was all so professional, so legitimate looking, that it almost made the insanity of the situation seem normal. The subway ride back to Queens passed in a blur. I clutched the folder to my chest like a talisman, my mind spinning. $250,000. All debts paid. A safe place to live. I could start saving money. Could maybe even think about a future that didn't involve working until I collapsed. But at what cost? Sebastian Cross was dangerous. He'd admitted as much. Working for him meant entering a world where getting shot was an occupational hazard, where security guards and bulletproof windows were necessities rather than paranoid precautions. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Shift starts in 2 hours. You coming in?" I'd completely forgotten about work. Should I go in and act like nothing had changed? Pretend I was still just Sarah Michaels, broke nurse from Queens, and not someone who'd been offered an escape route from her entire life? I texted back, "I'll be there." Because I wasn't ready to make this decision yet. Wasn't ready to admit to myself what I already knew I was going to do. I needed these last few hours of normalcy. One more shift where I was just a nurse, just a person trying to survive in an expensive city on an inadequate salary. One more shift before everything changed. The ER was insanity as usual. A construction accident had brought in multiple casualties, and we were short-staffed because Jenny Martinez had called in sick. Patricia was in rare form, snapping at everyone and making threats about overtime approval. I moved through it mechanically, my body on autopilot while my mind replayed Sebastian's proposition over and over. $250,000. All debts paid. Earth to Sarah. Marcus waved a hand in front of my face. "You okay? You've been staring at that IV bag for like 5 minutes. I blinked, focusing on the present. "Sorry. Just tired." "You're always tired lately." He studied me with concern. "Sarah, seriously, what's going on with you?" And suddenly, overwhelmingly, I wanted to tell him. Wanted to spill everything about Sebastian Cross and his impossible offer, and the choice I already knew I was going to make. But the words stuck in my throat, held back by Victoria's warning about discretion and the simple knowledge that Marcus wouldn't understand. No one would. "Nothing," I said instead. "Just the usual money stress. If you need to borrow some cash until payday, thanks, but I'm fine." The lie came easily. I'd been telling it for so long it felt like truth. The rest of the shift dragged on endlessly. Every patient blurred together. Every procedure felt mechanical. My mind was somewhere else entirely, in a glass tower in Midtown, making calculations about my survival. When I finally clocked out at 7 a.m., exhausted and wired with decision fatigue, I made my way back to my apartment. The eviction notice was still on my counter. The water-stained bird was still on my ceiling. Nothing had changed except everything. I pulled out Victoria's business card and stared at it for a long time. 24 hours, she'd said. But I didn't need 24 hours. I'd known what I was going to do the moment Sebastian mentioned paying off my debts. I'd known because I'd reached the end of other options. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the card. Victoria answered on the second ring. "Miss Michaels, have you reached a decision?" I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped off the cliff. "Yes, I accept." The next 72 hours passed in a whirlwind that left me dizzy and disoriented. Victoria Chen was terrifyingly efficient. Before I'd even hung up from accepting the position, she'd already dispatched a moving crew to my apartment. Professional movers in matching uniforms who packed my entire life, such as it was, into boxes with military precision, while I stood in the corner feeling useless. "Is there anything you want to keep separate?" one of them asked, gesturing at my pathetic collection of belongings. "Personal items? Valuables?" I almost laughed. Valuables. The most valuable thing I owned was my nursing license, and that couldn't be packed in a box. Just my laptop and some clothes for the next few days. They were done in under 2 hours. My whole life, everything I'd accumulated in 3 years in New York, fit into 8 cardboard boxes. The realization was more depressing than I'd expected. Victoria had also somehow managed to get me released from my lease without penalty. When I asked how she'd accomplished this, she'd simply smiled and said, "Your landlord was very understanding once we explained the situation." I didn't ask what situation she'd explained. I was learning quickly that in Sebastian Cross's world, questions often led to answers I wasn't ready to hear. Giving notice at Manhattan Presbyterian proved more complicated. Patricia had stared at me like I'd announced I was joining a cult when I told her I was resigning, effective immediately. Immediately? Her voice could have stripped paint. Michaels, nurses don't just quit with zero notice. We have schedules, patients, responsibilities. I understand, and I apologize for the inconvenience, but I've received an opportunity I can't pass up. The script Victoria had given me felt wooden in my mouth, but I pushed through. I'm willing to forfeit any unused vacation pay to help cover the transition. Damn right you are. Patricia's eyes narrowed. What kind of opportunity makes a nurse walk away from a steady job in this economy? A private nursing position, live-in care for a single client. All true, if carefully edited. The salary is substantially higher than what I make here. How substantially? I'd been warned not to share specifics, but the truth must have shown on my face because Patricia's expression shifted from angry to calculating. Well, good for you, I suppose. She turned back to her computer, already dismissing me. HR will process your final paycheck. You can leave your ID badge and locker key at the front desk. Just like that, 2 years at Manhattan Presbyterian were over. Marcus caught me as I was cleaning out my locker for the final time. You're really leaving? He looked genuinely hurt. Sarah, come on. We're friends. You couldn't give me more than 12 hours notice? It happened fast. I focused on emptying my locker, unable to meet his eyes. The opportunity just came up. What opportunity? Who just decides to quit their job overnight? Someone who's been drowning in debt and sees a lifeline. I snapped, then immediately regretted it. Marcus didn't deserve my frustration. I'm sorry. It's complicated. Is this about that guy from Friday night, the GSW? Marcus's eyes widened. Sarah, please tell me you're not getting involved with a patient. That's career suicide, not to mention probably illegal. It's not like that. Except it absolutely was like that, just not in the way Marcus thought. He offered me a job, a legitimate nursing position. It's all legal and above board. A legitimate position that requires you to quit with zero notice and refuse to tell your friends any details. Marcus crossed his arms. That doesn't sound legitimate. That sounds dangerous. He wasn't wrong. But danger was a relative concept when the alternative was homelessness. I appreciate your concern, Marcus. I really do. But I've made my decision. Will I at least be able to stay in touch? Can I have your new number or address? I'll reach out once I'm settled, I promised, knowing even as I said it that I probably wouldn't. Victoria had been clear about discretion. The fewer connections to my old life, the better. For everyone's safety. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in my expression must have stopped him. Take care of yourself, Sarah, and if you ever need help, real help, you know how to find me. I know. Thank you. The goodbye hug felt final in a way that made my chest tight. Marcus had been one of the few bright spots in my time at Manhattan Presbyterian. Losing that friendship was a price I hadn't fully calculated when accepting Sebastian's offer. By Tuesday afternoon, I was standing in the penthouse apartment that would be my new home, surrounded by my 8 boxes of belongings, and feeling like an imposter in someone else's life. Your suite is this way, Victoria said, leading me down a hallway lined with more original artwork. Mr. Cross wanted you to have the east wing. It's the most private area of the penthouse. She opened a door, and I stepped into what could only be described as an apartment within the apartment. A spacious bedroom with an actual king-sized bed and windows overlooking Central Park. A sitting area with a sofa and chairs that looked like they'd never been used. A bathroom larger than my entire previous kitchen, complete with a soaking tub and separate shower that could probably fit 4 people. There's a walk-in closet through there, Victoria pointed, and this door connects to Mr. Cross's medical suite, He's had it stocked with everything you requested. I'd provided a list of medical supplies and equipment the day before, barely believing any of this was real. Now I followed Victoria through the connecting door into a room that made my breath catch. It was a fully functional medical suite disguised as a luxury space. The equipment was tucked into elegant cabinets and behind frosted glass doors, but it was all there. Cardiac monitors, defibrillator, ventilator, surgical supplies, a pharmacy cabinet that would require my nursing license to access legally. Everything someone would need for emergency care without ever calling 911. The medical suite is kept locked at all times, Victoria explained, handing me a key card. Only you. Mr. Cross, and I have access. There's a panic button here. She indicated a red switch near the door. That will alert security if you're ever treating Mr. Cross and need backup. Backup for what? I asked, but Victoria had already moved back into my suite. Your contract is on the desk in your sitting room. Please review and sign it before dinner. Mr. Cross prefers to eat at 8. Formal dining room, first door on your left from the main living area. She glanced at her phone. That gives you about 4 hours to settle in. I suggest you rest. Mr. Cross keeps unusual hours, and you may find yourself working at odd times. Then she was gone, her heels clicking efficiently down the hallway, leaving me alone in my new gilded cage. I spent the first hour just sitting on the sofa, staring out at the park view, and trying to process the surreal turn my life had taken. 4 days ago, I'd been a broke nurse worried about eviction. Now I was living in a penthouse with a park view, working for a man who needed a private medical suite because people kept trying to kill him. The boxes from my old apartment sat in the corner, a reminder of everything I'd left behind. I should unpack them, should try to make this space feel like mine. But they looked so out of place here, those cheap cardboard boxes amid all this luxury. Like they knew, like I knew, that I didn't belong. Eventually, curiosity drove me to explore the rest of the penthouse. The main living area was as stunning as I remembered. All those windows, all that light. The kitchen was professional grade, the kind of space where actual chefs worked. I wondered if Sebastian employed a cook, or if I was expected to handle meals as well as medical care. The formal dining room made me pause. A table that could seat 12, set with china and crystal even though only Sebastian and I would be eating. It felt excessive and lonely at the same time. It's a bit much, isn't it? I spun around to find Sebastian leaning against the doorframe. He looked better than he had 3 days ago. More color in his face, moving with less obvious pain. But his hand still drifted unconsciously to his side, protecting the healing wound. I didn't hear you come in, I said, my heart still racing from being startled. Sorry, didn't mean to sneak up on you. He moved into the room with that same controlled grace I'd noticed before. Every movement economical and purposeful. I wanted to check on you. Make sure Victoria didn't overwhelm you with details. She was very thorough, I said carefully. It's a lot to take in. I imagine it is. He pulled out one of the dining chairs and sat, gesturing for me to do the same. Sit, please. I wanted to talk to you before dinner. I sat across from him, hyper-aware of the pristine table between us. This close, I could see details I'd missed in the hospital and during our first meeting. The scar on his left temple, barely visible but definitely there. The way his dark eyes seemed to catalog everything, always watching, always assessing. The expensive watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my previous year's salary. I know this is an adjustment, Sebastian began. And I know I haven't been entirely forthcoming about what this position entails. So, I want to give you a chance to ask questions. Anything you want to know. Where to even start? I had 1,000 questions, but most of them circled back to the same core issue. Who are you, really? And don't say import-export. I need the truth if I'm going to live here. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. My family has been involved in various business enterprises in New York for 3 generations. Shipping, real estate, investments, all legitimate on the surface. And underneath the surface? Underneath, there are arrangements with other families. Territories and agreements that aren't exactly legal, but aren't exactly illegal either. Gray areas that law enforcement tends to ignore, as long as we maintain certain protocols. You're talking about organized crime. I said it flatly, wanting him to acknowledge it directly. I'm talking about business, he corrected. Business that sometimes operates outside traditional legal frameworks. But I'm not a gangster, Sarah. I don't run drugs or weapons. I don't traffic in human beings or any of the uglier aspects of what you're imagining. Just the prettier aspects? I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice. Just the necessary aspects of operating in a city where legitimate channels are owned by people who want you to fail. His eyes hardened slightly. My family's businesses employ over 2,000 people. Those jobs exist because we're willing to work in the gray areas that put food on their tables. And someone shot you because of these necessary gray areas. Someone shot me because they want to take over territories my family has controlled for 30 years. Because they see an opportunity in the transition of power from my father to me. He leaned back in his chair. There are people who think I'm weak, that I can be removed easily. Are they wrong? A slight smile crossed his face. I suppose we'll find out. The casual way he discussed potential assassination attempts made my blood run cold. Why did you really hire me, Sebastian? Because I kept a promise in a trauma bay? That can't be the only reason. It's not. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. My previous doctor was on my father's payroll, loyal to him, not to me. When the shooting happened, I couldn't risk going to someone who might report back to my father about my condition, about my vulnerabilities. So you needed someone outside your organization, someone you could trust. Someone who had already proven their integrity under pressure, he agreed. You didn't know who I was when you saved me, Sarah. You did it because it was right. Because I asked you not to let me die and you took that seriously. He leaned forward again. That kind of character is rare, especially in my world. Your world sounds exhausting. It is. No hesitation, no attempt to romanticize it. It's exhausting and dangerous and sometimes soul-crushing. But it's also the only world I've ever known. The only one I know how to navigate. I thought about that. About being born into a life you didn't choose. Into expectations and dangers that were legacy rather than choice. In a way, I understood it. I'd been born into debt too. Into a working-class family where college meant loans, and loans meant decades of repayment. Neither of us had chosen our prisons. We'd just been born into them. The man who shot you. Do you know who it was yet? We have suspicions. His expression went carefully neutral. Nothing confirmed. But we're investigating. And when you do confirm it, what then? Then I'll handle it. The finality in his voice was absolute. But that's not something you need to worry about. How can I not worry about it? If someone's trying to kill you and I'm living here, doesn't that make me a target too? You're protected, he said firmly. No one touches anyone in my household. That's understood. Even my enemies have rules. Even my enemies have rules. The phrasing made it sound like warfare, which I supposed it was. Just not the kind with armies and borders. And if they break the rules, they won't. He stood, signaling the conversation was over. Dinner at 8, dress comfortably. It's just us, and I prefer casual evenings. He left before I could ask any more questions, moving down the hallway with that same controlled grace. I sat alone in the formal dining room for several more minutes, trying to reconcile the man I'd just been talking to with the critically injured patient I'd helped save 4 days ago. Sebastian Cross was dangerous. That much was clear. But he was also honest. At least, more honest than I'd expected. He hadn't tried to pretend his world was anything other than what it was. Hadn't romanticized the violence or glamorized the risk. That honesty was almost more terrifying than lies would have been. Back in my suite, I forced myself to unpack. Hanging my clearance rack clothes in a walk-in closet designed for designer wardrobes felt absurd, but I did it anyway. This was my home now, however temporarily. I needed to make it feel real. The contract was exactly where Victoria had said it would be. 20 pages of legal language that I forced myself to read cover to cover. Employment terms, confidentiality agreements, non-disclosure clauses that extended even after termination. The salary numbers that had seemed too good to be true were right there in black and white. $250,000 annually. Health insurance. Life insurance. A death benefit that made my stomach clench because apparently my death was a real enough possibility that it needed to be addressed in writing. I signed it with trembling hands, my signature looking small and insignificant on the final page. Just like that, I belonged to Sebastian Cross's world. Not as an employee, exactly. The contract was careful about that. But as something. Someone whose life was now inextricably tied to his. Dinner at 8 turned out to be surprisingly normal. Sebastian had changed into jeans and a soft sweater, and the meal was delivered by a catering service rather than prepared in the intimidating kitchen. We ate at the breakfast bar instead of the formal dining room, and he asked me about my nursing background, about what had made me choose healthcare as a career. My grandmother, I told him, surprised to find myself being honest. She had Alzheimer's. Watching the nurses care for her in those final years, how gentle they were, how patient. It made me want to do that. To help people when they're most vulnerable. And is that what you found in nursing? He seemed genuinely curious. Sometimes, when there's time to actually care instead of just process patients through the system. I took a sip of the excellent wine he'd poured. Mostly it's been paperwork and bureaucracy and trying to remember why I chose this in the first place. Maybe you'll remember here, he said quietly, without all the bureaucracy. It was a kind thought, even if we both knew that wasn't why I was here. I wasn't here to rediscover my passion for nursing. I was here because I was broke and desperate, and he'd offered me a way out. But I appreciated the kindness anyway. After dinner, I retreated to my suite and collapsed onto the impossibly comfortable bed. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, with a thread count higher than my previous salary. The pillows were memory foam, designed by someone who understood that sleep was sacred. Everything about this space was designed for comfort and luxury. And yet I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and wondering what I'd really agreed to. What price I would ultimately pay for this salvation. Outside my window, Manhattan glittered with a million lights. The city that had chewed me up and spit me out, that had left me broken and broke and desperate. From up here it looked beautiful, manageable. From up here you couldn't see the alleys where men got shot. Couldn't hear the sirens or smell the desperation. Couldn't feel the weight of impossible choices pressing down until you couldn't breathe. From up here, everything looked different. Better. I just hoped that when I finally came back down to earth, I'd survive the fall. I settled into a routine that felt surreal, even as it became familiar. Sebastian was an unexpectedly easy patient, compliant with his medication schedule, diligent about his physical therapy, and honest about his pain levels. Each morning, I'd check his wound, monitor his vitals, and document his progress in the medical chart I'd created. The surgical site was healing well. No signs of infection or complications. Dr. Reeves would have been pleased. The medical suite became my domain. I'd spend hours organizing supplies, checking expiration dates, ensuring everything was exactly where it needed to be for a potential emergency. It was busy work, really. Sebastian was recovering smoothly, and there were no crises requiring the sophisticated equipment at my disposal. But the routine kept me occupied, kept me from thinking too much about the strangeness of my new life. Victoria stopped by most afternoons, always with some administrative detail that needed my attention. Tax forms to sign, insurance paperwork to complete, a new credit card issued in my name with a limit that made my stomach drop. For any personal expenses, she'd explained, Mr. Cross wants you to be comfortable. Comfortable. That was one word for it. Overwhelmed might have been more accurate. The penthouse itself was a study in contradictions. During the day, it was peaceful, sunlight streaming through those enormous windows, the sounds of the city muffled by bulletproof glass. But at night, the place came alive in a different way. People arrived after dark. Men in expensive suits who moved with the same controlled grace as Sebastian, who spoke in low voices in the formal dining room while I stayed in my suite and tried not to listen. Business meetings, I told myself. Legitimate business meetings. But I'd seen enough episodes of crime dramas to recognize what these gatherings actually were. Territory disputes, financial arrangements, the kind of business that couldn't be discussed in legitimate office buildings with proper paperwork. Sebastian never invited me to join these meetings, never even acknowledged they were happening. In the mornings, he'd greet me with the same polite professionalism, submit to my medical examinations without complaint, and discuss innocuous topics like the weather or current events, as if we both hadn't heard voices raised in argument through the walls the night before. It was a strange kind of courtesy, this pretense that I was just his nurse, just someone providing medical care, and not a witness to whatever else was happening in this penthouse. 3 weeks into my new position, the pretense shattered. I was in the medical suite at 2 a.m, unable to sleep and reorganizing the pharmacy cabinet for the 3rd time. The penthouse had been quiet for hours, the last business meeting having concluded around 11. I'd heard the elevator doors close, footsteps in the hallway, then silence. The bang that echoed through the apartment made my heart stop. Not a gunshot. I knew what those sounded like now, could distinguish between gunfire and other loud noises. This was something hitting a wall, or someone. I stood frozen, my hand on a bottle of morphine, listening. Voices, raised but not quite shouting. Sebastian's voice, tense and cold. And another voice, heavily accented. Russian, maybe. Every instinct screamed at me to stay in the medical suite, to lock the door and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But I was a nurse. More than that, I was Sebastian's nurse, if something was wrong. I grabbed the medical bag I'd assembled for emergencies and moved quietly to the door connecting my suite to the main apartment. The voices were clearer now. You think I don't know what you're planning? The accented voice was furious. You think I'm stupid? I think you're making assumptions based on bad intelligence. Sebastian's voice was controlled but hard. And I think you need to leave. Now. Not until you give me what I'm owed. You're owed nothing. Our agreement was fulfilled months ago. A crash. Something expensive hitting the floor. I pressed myself against the wall, pulse racing. Should I call security? Victoria? I didn't even know the proper protocol for a situation like this. Everything all right out here? A new voice. Deep, calm, with an undertone of threat. One of Sebastian's security team, I realized. They must have responded to the noise. Mr. Volkov was just leaving, Sebastian said. Weren't you, Alexei? A long pause, then footsteps. The elevator doors opening and closing. Silence. I stayed frozen against the wall, barely breathing. Slowly, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by trembling exhaustion. What had I almost walked into? What would have happened if I'd opened that door? A soft knock made me jump. Sarah? I know you're awake. Sebastian's voice, gentle now. all the hardness from the confrontation gone. I opened the door to find him standing in the hallway. His face was carefully neutral, but his knuckles were bleeding. Not badly, but enough to need attention. "You hit him," I said. "The wall, actually." He held up his hand, examining the damage with mild interest. "Volkov has a hard head. Walls are more satisfying." "You shouldn't have done that. Your abdominal muscles aren't fully healed. The force could have torn." I was already moving, guiding him toward the medical suite. Nursing instinct overriding fear. "Always the nurse," he murmured, but he followed without argument. In the bright light of the medical suite, I could assess the damage properly. His knuckles were torn but not seriously injured. I cleaned the wounds with methodical efficiency, applying antibiotic ointment and bandages. His hands were calloused, I noticed. Not the soft hands of someone who'd never done physical labor. These were hands that knew violence intimately. "You heard the argument," he said. Not a question. I heard raised voices. I didn't hear specifics. I finished with his right hand and moved to examine his left. Is this normal? Late-night visitors who get into fights? Define normal. He winced as I cleaned a deeper cut. Tonight was not ideal. Volkov is angry about some business arrangements. He'll get over it. And if he doesn't? Sebastian met my eyes. Then he'll be dealt with. But that's not your concern. It becomes my concern when I'm living here, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I need to know what I'm walking into, Sebastian. Is this going to be a regular occurrence? Should I be keeping a trauma kit by my bed? He was quiet for a moment, considering. Do you remember what I said about gray areas? About operating outside traditional legal frameworks? I remember. Sometimes those gray areas get messy. People like Volkov, they don't respond to contracts or legal threats. They respond to shows of strength, to proof that you're not someone they can push around. He flexed his bandaged hand experimentally. Tonight was a show of strength. By punching a wall, by not punching him, by keeping control when he was trying to provoke me into doing something rash. Sebastian's expression was serious. In my world, restraint is often more powerful than violence, though violence has its place too. I finished bandaging his hand in silence, processing this. I'd known intellectually that Sebastian operated in dangerous spaces, but knowing something and witnessing it were different things. The reality of violence, even controlled, measured violence, was harder than the abstract idea of it. Your wound looks good, I said finally, moving to check his abdominal incision. No signs of strain from the altercation? You were lucky. Luck has nothing to do with it. I know my limits. He watched as I examined the healing surgical site. How much did tonight scare you? Honestly, a lot. I stepped back, disposing of the used supplies. I've treated gunshot victims, stab wounds, assaults. But I've never lived in a place where those things might happen. There's a difference between treating violence and potentially experiencing it. I understand if you want to leave. He said it quietly, without inflection. Your contract has an exit clause, 30 days notice, and you walk away with 6 months severance. No hard feelings. 6 months severance would be over $100,000, enough to pay off my debts and start fresh somewhere else. It was a generous offer, and I had no intention of taking it. I'm not leaving, I heard myself say, but I need you to be honest with me. All the way honest. Is my life in danger being here? No more than anyone else in my orbit. Possibly less, since you're clearly medical personnel rather than part of the organization. He stood, testing his bandaged hand. But I won't lie and say there's zero risk. Anyone close to me becomes a potential pressure point. That's reality. And if someone decides to use me as that pressure point, then they'll learn why that's a fatal mistake. The coldness in his voice sent chills down my spine. I protect what's mine, Sarah. Always. What's mine. The phrasing was possessive in a way that should have bothered me. Instead, I found it oddly reassuring. In a world of uncertainties, Sebastian's certainty was grounding. I should let you get back to sleep, he said, moving toward the door. Thank you for the medical attention, and for not panicking. Sebastian. He paused, turning back. That man, Volkov, is he the one who shot you? No, but he's connected to the people who did. His jaw tightened. We're getting closer to identifying them. When we do. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The implications were clear enough. After he left, I stood in the medical suite for a long time, staring at the bloodied gauze in the trash. Evidence of violence in this sterile, pristine space. A reminder that beneath the luxury and the professional arrangements, this was still a dangerous world, and I'd chosen to stay in it. The next morning, Victoria appeared at my suite before I'd even finished my coffee. Mr. Cross wanted me to brief you on security protocols, she said without preamble, setting her tablet on my coffee table. Last night's incident has prompted a review of household safety measures. Security protocols? I echoed. I thought the building was already secure. The building, yes, but there are additional precautions we're implementing specifically for you. She pulled up a document on her tablet. First, you'll be assigned a personal security detail, someone who will accompany you anytime you leave the building. I don't need a bodyguard. You do now. Her tone brooked no argument. Second, you'll need to install this app on your phone. It's a direct link to our security team. One button press sends your exact location and an alert. She handed me her phone, showing me the simple interface, a single red button labeled emergency. This is excessive, I protested. I'm just a nurse. No one's going to target me. Mr. Volkov left 3 associates in the building's underground garage last night, Victoria said calmly. They were removed by security, but their presence suggests that people are watching, taking inventory of who matters to Mr. Cross. The implication settled over me like cold water. I matter to Sebastian? You're his private medical staff. You have access to his vulnerabilities, his schedule, his physical condition. Yes, Miss Michaels, you matter. She pulled up another screen. Which is why you'll also be taking self-defense training. 3 times a week starting tomorrow. Self-defense training. I laughed, slightly hysterical. This is insane. A month ago, I was worrying about rent. Now I need martial arts lessons? Krav Maga, specifically. It's practical, efficient, and focuses on realistic threat scenarios. Victoria's expression softened slightly. I know this is overwhelming, but Mr. Cross takes the safety of his household very seriously, especially after last night. I thought about Sebastian's words. I protect what's mine. This was what he'd meant. Not just vague assurances, but concrete actions. Security details and panic buttons and combat training. Part of me wanted to be insulted by the implication that I needed protecting, but the rational part, the part that had heard Volkov's fury last night, knew this wasn't about my capabilities. It was about the reality of the world I'd entered. Fine, I said finally. Security detail, panic button app, self-defense classes. What else? That's it for now. Victoria stood, tucking her tablet under her arm. Your instructor will be Marcus Chen. He's been with our organization for 5 years. Former military, extensive combat experience. You'll like him. Marcus Chen? The name hit me like a punch. Wait, do you mean Marcus from Manhattan Presbyterian? Victoria's expression was carefully neutral. The same. Why? Is that a problem? My mind reeled. Marcus, my friend from the hospital, worked for Sebastian. Had been working for Sebastian's organization while we were colleagues? He never said anything. Never mentioned. Of course he didn't. Discretion is part of the job. Victoria moved toward the door. He's been providing informal security at the hospital for years, making sure Mr. Cross's interests were protected in that environment. What interests? Sebastian was never even a patient there until... And then it clicked. He was watching for something. Or someone. Very perceptive. Victoria opened the door. Your first training session is tomorrow at 6 a.m. in the building's gym. Don't be late. Marcus hates tardiness even more than I do. She left, and I sank onto my sofa, trying to process this new information. Marcus had been working for Sebastian all along. Had our friendship been real, or just part of his job? When he'd expressed concern about my sudden departure, had that been genuine worry or fear that I was compromising something? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hey Sarah, it's Marcus. Guess we're working together again. See you tomorrow for your first ass kicking. Bring water. You'll need it. Despite everything, the revelations, the confusion, the surreal turn my life had taken, I found myself smiling. At least Marcus's sense of humor was real. That night, I had dinner with Sebastian again. He'd ordered Thai food, and we ate at the breakfast bar like we had that first night. He asked about my day, about whether Victoria had sufficiently traumatized me with security protocols. Marcus Chen, I said instead of answering. You had a plant at Manhattan Presbyterian. I prefer the term security asset. He took a bite of pad thai. And yes, after my father's stroke last year, we increased security measures across all areas of potential vulnerability. Hospitals were obvious targets. You thought someone might try to kill you in a hospital? I thought someone might try to gather intelligence about my medical history, my vulnerabilities, my connections to certain doctors. He shrugged. Marcus's position there was useful. It kept people honest. And his friendship with me? Was that part of the assignment? Sebastian set down his fork, giving me his full attention. No. Marcus chose to befriend you independently. In fact, he specifically requested to be assigned as your instructor because he was worried about you adjusting to this life. The tightness in my chest eased slightly. So he actually cares. It wasn't all fake. Marcus is one of the most genuine people in my organization. It's why I value him. Sebastian resumed eating. He was also vocal about his opposition to bringing you here. Thought I was putting you in unnecessary danger. He wasn't wrong. No, Sebastian agreed. He wasn't, but you made your choice. And Marcus respects that, even if he doesn't agree with it. We finished dinner in comfortable silence. I was learning that Sebastian didn't fill empty space with meaningless chatter. When he spoke, it was purposeful. When he was quiet, he was thinking. The man who shot you, I said as we were clearing the plates. Are you getting close to identifying him? Sebastian's expression closed off slightly. Closer, but not close enough. And when you do identify him, then we'll have a conversation. He loaded our plates into the dishwasher with methodical precision. And depending on how that conversation goes, either the problem will be resolved, or you'll kill him. He looked at me then, his dark eyes unreadable. Does that bother you? It should have horrified me. But I thought about the man in the alley who'd shot Sebastian, who'd tried to take a life with casual violence. Thought about Volkov and his threats, about the undercurrent of danger that ran through this entire world. I don't know, I admitted. Ask me again when it happens. Fair enough. He smiled slightly. You're adapting better than I expected. Yeah, well, turns out I'm more morally flexible than I thought. I meant it as a joke, but it came out hollow. Sebastian moved closer, his hand coming up to tilt my chin so I had to meet his eyes. You're not morally flexible, Sarah. You're a survivor. There's a difference. The touch was brief, professional even, but it sent warmth through me that had nothing to do with temperature. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how small the kitchen felt with both of us in it. I should get to bed. Early training session tomorrow. Marcus will work you hard, but you'll be stronger for it. Sebastian watched me with that same assessing gaze. Good night, Sarah. Good night. I retreated to my suite, my skin still tingling where he'd touched me. This was dangerous territory, not just the violence and the security protocols, but this growing awareness of Sebastian as more than just my employer, more than just the man I'd saved. I'd come here for money, for survival, not for whatever this complicated feeling was that made my heart race when he looked at me. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at my water-stain-free ceiling, I couldn't deny that something had shifted. The transaction we'd agreed to, medical care for financial security, was becoming something more complex, something that felt less like employment and more like... I didn't let myself finish that thought, didn't let myself acknowledge what I was starting to feel, because acknowledging it would make it real. And I wasn't ready for that reality yet, not when I was still learning to navigate this one. Part 5. The deepening training with Marcus was brutal. He hadn't been joking about bringing water. By the end of our first session, I was drenched in sweat, my muscles screaming, and my pride thoroughly demolished. Again, Marcus said, not even breathing hard while I was bent over gasping for air. And this time, remember to protect your core. If someone grabs you from behind, your instinct should be to elbow them in the solar plexus, I know. I straightened, squaring my shoulders. But I've been awake for 12 minutes. Can we ease into the attempted murder? His grin was familiar, that same expression I'd seen 100 times at Manhattan Presbyterian. This is easing in. Wait until week 2 when I introduce weapons defense. We ran through the drill again, and again, and again until my body moved on muscle memory rather than conscious thought. That was the point, Marcus explained. In a real crisis, you didn't have time to think. You needed instinct. Break, he finally called, tossing me a towel. You're doing good, Sarah. Better than most beginners. I collapsed onto the gym floor, not caring how undignified it looked. How long have you been working for Sebastian? 5 years, since I left the army. He settled next to me, his breathing still annoyingly normal. The organization recruited me for security work. Hospital detail was my assignment for the last 3. And you never thought to mention it? Would you have believed me if I'd told you I was secretly working for a crime family while changing bedpans? He raised an eyebrow. Come on, Sarah. You would have thought I was crazy. He wasn't wrong. Were you always planning to recruit me? Is that why you befriended me? No. His expression turned serious. I befriended you because you were genuine in a place full of people playing politics, because you actually gave a shit about patients instead of just going through the motions. He paused. When Sebastian got shot and you treated him, I thought it was bad luck. Then when he offered you this position, I tried to talk him out of it. Why? Because this life isn't for everyone. It requires a certain moral flexibility that I wasn't sure you had. He studied me. But you're still here, still adapting. So maybe I was wrong about you. I'm not sure if that's a compliment. It's an observation. He stood, offering me his hand. Come on, core exercises, then we're done for today. The next hour was torture disguised as fitness. But by the end, I felt more grounded than I had in weeks. Physical exertion was meditative in its way. It demanded complete presence, left no room for existential anxiety about the choices I'd made. After I showered and changed, I found Sebastian in his study. It was a room I'd only glimpsed before. All dark wood and leather, walls lined with books that looked actually read rather than decorative. He was on the phone, speaking in what sounded like Italian, but he gestured for me to enter. I waited while he finished the call, taking in the details of the space. Framed photographs on one wall. Sebastian with an older man who shared his features, presumably his father. Sebastian in his 20s, looking somehow even more dangerous despite being younger. A woman with kind eyes and dark hair, her hand on young Sebastian's shoulder. "My mother," he said, ending the call and following my gaze. "She died when I was 15. Cancer." "I'm sorry." It was a long time ago. But something in his expression suggested the wound was still fresh. "She would have liked you." "How do you know? You barely know me." "I know enough." He moved to sit behind his desk, and I noticed he winced slightly. "And my mother had good instincts about people. She always said you could judge someone's character by how they treated those who couldn't benefit them. That's why you hired me." The realization clicked into place. "Because I treated you like a person when I thought you were just another gunshot victim. No benefit to me, just doing the right thing." "Partially." He leaned back in his chair. "Also because you were excellent at your job. And because when I looked into your background, I found someone who'd been systematically crushed by a system that rewards greed and punishes compassion." That's a pretty dramatic interpretation of student loan debt. Is it? You dedicated your life to helping people, and the reward was $250,000 in debt and poverty wages. Meanwhile, hedge fund managers who produce nothing of value retire at 40. His eyes were intense. Tell me that's not a broken system. I couldn't argue with that. So this is charity? You're rescuing me from systemic inequality? This is pragmatism. I need medical care. You need financial stability. Both of us benefit. He paused. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in extracting you from a situation that was killing you slowly. The honesty was disarming. You like playing savior. I like correcting injustices when I can. He stood, moving to pour himself a drink from the bar cart near the window. Whiskey? It's 10 in the morning. I'm aware. He poured 2 glasses anyway, bringing one to me. Humor me. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? We identified the man who shot me. His name is Viktor Kozlov. Works for the Bratva, Russian organized crime. And as of 2 hours ago, he's agreed to a meeting. The glass felt heavy in my hand. A meeting that ends with him dead. A meeting that ends with answers. Sebastian took a sip of his whiskey. Why he shot me, who ordered it, what they hope to accomplish. Those answers will determine what happens next. And you want me to celebrate this? I want you to understand what it means. Understanding leads to resolution. Resolution leads to safety. His gaze held mine. Your safety, Sarah. This has been hanging over both of us since the night you saved me. He was right. The threat had been theoretical until Volkov's visit, but it had always been there. Knowing Sebastian's shooter was still out there, still a danger, had colored everything. If this meeting led to resolution, maybe I could finally breathe. I raised my glass. 2 answers, then. 2 answers. He clinked his glass against mine, and we drank. The whiskey burned going down, warmth spreading through my chest. I'd never been much of a drinker. Couldn't afford to be. Not with my schedule and my responsibilities. But here, in this moment, it felt appropriate. Felt like marking something significant. When is this meeting? I asked. Tonight. Neutral territory. Witnesses present. All very civilized. His tone was dry. Relatively speaking. Do you want me to have the medical suite prepped, in case things go wrong? He shook his head. I appreciate the offer, but I'm hoping this stays diplomatic. And if it doesn't, the security team knows protocol. I nodded, setting down my empty glass. I should let you prepare then. Sarah. His voice stopped me at the door. Thank you. For not asking me not to go. For not trying to talk me out of it. Would it work if I did? No. But most people would try anyway. I thought about that. I think you do what you need to do, and my job is to make sure you survive it. That's the arrangement. The arrangement. He repeated the words like they tasted bitter. Right. I left before I could analyze the tone in his voice, before I could ask what he'd meant, because I suspected I knew. And I wasn't ready to acknowledge it. The penthouse felt empty without Sebastian. He left at 8 that evening, accompanied by 4 security personnel and Victoria. She'd briefed me before they departed. Stay in the penthouse, keep my phone charged, don't panic if I didn't hear from them for several hours. How long should I panic if I don't hear from you? I'd asked. If we're not back by dawn, call this number. She'd handed me a card with a single phone number on it. Ask for Robert. Tell him Victoria's Protocol 7. He'll know what to do. That was 6 hours ago. Now it was past 2 in the morning, and I was wearing a path in the carpet from pacing. The medical suite was prepped despite Sebastian's assurances. Extra blood units from the private supplier Victoria used. Surgical instruments sterilized and ready. Every medication I might need for trauma care stocked and accessible. I'd told Sebastian I wouldn't try to stop him. I'd meant it. But that didn't make the waiting any easier. Didn't stop my mind from running through 100 different scenarios, each worse than the last. The elevator chimed at 2:47 a.m. I practically ran to the entrance, then forced myself to slow, composed, professional. Just his nurse, waiting for her employer to return. Sebastian walked in under his own power, which was the first good sign. The second was that he was smiling, not his usual controlled expression, but genuine satisfaction. We got everything, he said without preamble. Names, dates, the whole conspiracy. Kozlov sang like a bird. Is he alive? Yes, for now. He shrugged off his jacket, and I noticed blood on his shirt sleeve. That's not mine. Well, most of it isn't. I moved into nurse mode immediately, guiding him toward the medical suite. Most of it isn't. That's reassuring. Kozlov had a knife. I had a better knife. He let me peel off his shirt, revealing a shallow cut along his ribs. Barely a scratch. A scratch that needs cleaning and probably stitches. I was already gathering supplies. Sit down. This is going to hurt. It always does. But he sat obediently on the examination table, watching as I worked. You were worried about me. You're my patient. Of course I was worried. Your patient. The same bitter tone from earlier. Right. I focused on cleaning the wound, on not meeting his eyes. This needs 3 stitches, maybe 4. I'm going to numb it first. Don't bother. I've had worse. Sebastian. Just do it, please. His voice was tired. Not physically tired, but emotionally exhausted. Like he'd spent the evening confronting demons and was ready for them to be vanquished. I stitched the wound with quick, efficient movements. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched me work with that same intense focus he brought to everything. Who ordered the hit? I asked quietly. My cousin, Marco. He laughed without humor. Family business, literally. I'm sorry. Don't be. Marco was always ambitious, always resentful that my father chose me as successor instead of him. He winced as I pulled the last stitch tight. Tonight, he learned that ambition has consequences. I didn't ask what those consequences were. Didn't want to know. All done. Keep it dry for 48 hours. No strenuous activity. Sarah. He caught my wrist as I turned away, his grip gentle but firm. Look at me. I did. And the expression on his face made my breath catch. Not the controlled crime boss or the calculated businessman. Just a man who looked exhausted and lonely and strangely vulnerable in the harsh light of the medical suite. "Thank you," he said, "for being here, for not running when you could have. Where would I run to? I tried to make it light, but it came out raw. You paid off my debts. This is my life now. That's not why you stayed." He pulled me closer until I was standing between his knees, his face level with mine. "You stayed because you're not a coward, because you see things through even when they terrify you." "I am terrified," I admitted. "Every day. Of this life, of what I've become, of me, and of what I feel for you." The confession slipped out before I could stop it. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. Then Sebastian's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. "I hired you because you were honest," he said quietly. "Because in a life full of people who lie and manipulate and scheme, you were genuine. Don't stop being that now." "What do you want me to say?" "That you're afraid of what you feel, but you're going to feel it anyway." His eyes were dark and intent. "Because that's who you are. Someone who faces hard truths instead of running from them." He was right. About all of it. I was terrified of these feelings, of the way my heart raced when he looked at me, of how his absence tonight had felt like a physical ache. But I wasn't going to deny it. Wasn't going to pretend I was still just his nurse, still just an employee following the terms of a contract. "This is a terrible idea," I whispered. "Probably." His thumb traced my lower lip. "Does that matter?" "It should, but it doesn't." "No," I admitted. "It doesn't." He kissed me then, soft and slow, like he had all the time in the world, like we weren't standing in a private medical suite at 3 a.m, him bleeding from a knife wound, me in yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt. Like this was normal, and right instead of complicated and impossible. When we finally broke apart, I was trembling. "Sebastian, I know." He rested his forehead against mine. "I know all the reasons this is wrong. Why it complicates everything. Why we should maintain professional boundaries. Do you care about any of those reasons?" "Not even a little bit." He smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerously handsome to devastatingly beautiful. "Do you?" I should have. Should have listed every logical reason why this was a catastrophically bad idea. But looking at him, at this man who'd saved me from drowning in debt, who'd brought me into his dangerous world, and then done everything possible to keep me safe, I couldn't make myself care about logic. "Not even a little bit," I echoed. He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I let myself fall into it, into him, into this impossible situation that felt more right than anything in my carefully planned life ever had. We talked until dawn, curled together on the medical suite's examination table like it was the most natural place in the world. He told me about Marco's betrayal, about the network of family members who'd been working against him, about his father's declining health and the pressure of taking over an empire he'd never wanted. I told him about my grandmother, about choosing nursing because I'd wanted to matter to someone, about the slow erosion of that idealism under the weight of debt and exhaustion. "You matter," he said, his fingers tangled in my hair. "To me, in ways I'm still figuring out. This is going to be complicated. Everything worth having is complicated." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "But we'll figure it out. Together." Together. The word felt like a promise, like the beginning of something I hadn't known I was searching for until I'd found it. As sunlight began filtering through the windows, turning Manhattan golden, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of this life, not of Sebastian's world, not of whatever we were becoming. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next 2 months passed in a blur of training sessions, medical checkups, and stolen moments with Sebastian that felt both illicit and inevitable. We were careful. No public displays. Nothing that would signal to his organization that our relationship had evolved beyond professional. But in private, the boundaries between employer and employee had dissolved completely. Marcus noticed, of course. He cornered me after training one morning, his expression somewhere between concerned and resigned. "You're sleeping with him." I didn't bother denying it. "Is that a problem?" "That depends." He handed me a water bottle. "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. "Yes, I think I am." "Then it's not a problem." He paused. "But Sarah, you need to understand what this means. You're not just his nurse anymore. You're his partner. In this world, that makes you both incredibly protected and incredibly vulnerable." "I understand." "I don't think you do. Not fully." He sat on the weight bench, gesturing for me to join him. "When you're just staff, you're neutral, protected by professional boundaries. But when you become personal to someone like Sebastian, you become a target. A weakness that enemies will exploit." I thought about Volkov's late-night visit, about the security protocols Victoria had implemented. I have a security detail, training, panic buttons, all of which means nothing if someone really wants to hurt Sebastian through you. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "I need you to be realistic about what you're signing up for." "I am being realistic. I know this is dangerous." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who's fallen in love and convinced herself the danger doesn't matter." He held up a hand to forestall my protest. "I'm not saying you're wrong to feel how you feel. I'm saying you need to go into this with eyes wide open." "My eyes are open, Marcus. I promise." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. But if you ever need an exit strategy, you come to me. No judgment, no questions. I'll get you out." The offer was touching and terrifying in equal measure. "Thank you, but I'm not leaving." "Yeah," he said softly. "I know." Sebastian's father died 3 weeks later. A massive stroke that left no time for goodbyes or final words. I watched Sebastian receive the news with that same controlled composure he brought to everything, his face betraying nothing. But in the privacy of his bedroom that night, he'd finally let the mask crack. "I wasn't ready," he'd said, his voice raw. "I'm not ready for this." I'd held him, offering the only comfort I could: presence without judgment, space without abandonment. It was a language I'd learned as a nurse, that vocabulary of supportive silence that said more than words ever could. The funeral was a study in contrasts. Legitimate business associates mixing with clearly illegitimate ones. Lawmakers and crime bosses offering condolences side by side. Sebastian navigated it all with grace, playing the grieving son and ascending power broker simultaneously. I stood at the back of the church, technically there as part of his household staff. But when his eyes found mine across the crowded space, the look we exchanged was anything but professional. After the funeral came the consolidation of power. Sebastian moved quickly to secure his position, neutralizing threats and strengthening alliances with ruthless efficiency. I saw a side of him I'd only glimpsed before: the strategist, the leader, the man who commanded absolute loyalty through a combination of respect and controlled fear. It should have frightened me. Instead, I found it fascinating. This was who he was. Not the man who kissed me gently in the early morning hours, but the one who wielded power like a surgical instrument. Both were real. Both were Sebastian. "I need you to do something for me," he said one evening, about 6 weeks after his father's death. We were in his study, the city spread out below us like a glittering promise. "Of course. What do you need?" "I need you to meet with Marco." My blood ran cold. "Your cousin?" The one who hired someone to kill you? The same. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, his movements deliberate. He's requesting a meeting. Neutral territory, witnesses present. He claims he wants to discuss terms. Terms for what? For his continued survival. Sebastian's smile was sharp. Marco knows he failed, knows I have evidence of his betrayal. He's hoping to negotiate his way out of consequences. And you want me there because part of his offer involves information about threats to you. He handed me a glass. Apparently, he's not the only one who sees you as my weakness. The casual way he said it, my weakness, made my chest tight. What kind of threats? That's what we need to find out. He settled into the chair across from me. I won't force you to go. This is your choice. But having you there changes the dynamic. Shows Marco that you're not someone to be used against me. Because I'm protected. Because you're mine. No hesitation, no qualification. And everyone needs to understand that. Mine. The possessiveness should have grated against my independence, my autonomy. Instead, it felt like safety, like belonging. When is the meeting? Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. He studied me over his whiskey. Are you sure about this? I thought about Marcus's warnings, about the vulnerability that came with being important to someone like Sebastian. Thought about the scared, broke nurse I'd been 3 months ago, drowning in debt and despair. That woman wouldn't have recognized me now. This version who trained in combat 3 times a week, who lived in a penthouse and understood the unspoken rules of organized crime, who'd fallen in love with a man most people feared. I'm sure, I said. We do this together. The meeting was held in a private room at an upscale restaurant in Midtown. Sebastian had explained the choice. Public enough to ensure good behavior, private enough for honest conversation. The kind of space where violence was possible, but unlikely. We arrived with Victoria and 3 security personnel. Marco was already there, flanked by his own guards. He looked older than in the photograph I'd seen in Sebastian's study, his face lined with stress and fear, poorly masked as confidence. Sebastian. Marco stood, extending his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Sebastian ignored the offered handshake, moving to sit at the head of the table. I took the seat beside him, hyper-aware of Marco's gaze assessing me. You must be the famous Sarah Michaels, Marco said, his smile not reaching his eyes. My cousin's guardian angel. I'm his nurse. I kept my voice neutral. Is that all? Marco's tone was mocking. Forgive me, but the way Sebastian talks about you, I assumed you were much more. Watch your tone, Marco. Sebastian's voice was cold. You're here to provide information, not commentary. Marco's smile faltered. He settled back into his chair, his confidence visibly cracking. Right. Information. About threats to Miss Michaels. Specifically? Victoria had her tablet out, ready to document everything. The Kozlov family isn't happy about Victor's cooperation. They blame Miss Michaels for facilitating his capture. There's been talk about retaliation. My stomach dropped. What kind of retaliation? Nothing specific yet, but the Kozlovs are known for long memories and creative revenge. Marco leaned forward. I thought you should know, given your importance to my cousin. Sebastian's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. What else? There are other families watching, Sebastian, seeing how you handle power. Some think you're too soft, that your father's ruthlessness died with him. Marco's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction. They see Miss Michaels as evidence of that softness, a weakness to exploit. Let them try. Sebastian's voice was deadly quiet. Anyone who touches Sarah will learn exactly how not soft I can be. The threat hung in the air, clear and absolute. Marco actually flinched. I'm just passing along information, trying to prove my value. His desperation was showing now. I made a mistake, Sebastian. I know that. But I can still be useful. I can provide intelligence, maintain connections. You tried to have me killed, Marco. Sebastian's composure was absolute. You betrayed our family, endangered our business, and cost me months of instability. What part of that suggests you deserve continued existence, much less a position in my organization? We're family. Marco's voice cracked. That has to count for something. Family tried to murder me. Professional rivals simply compete. Sebastian stood, signaling the meeting was over. You've provided your information. Consider that your payment for the quick death you'll receive instead of the slow one you earned. Marco's face went white. Sebastian, please. Security will escort you out. You have 48 hours to settle your affairs. After that. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We left Marco sitting at the table, his fate sealed. In the car back to the penthouse, I found myself shaking despite my efforts to remain composed. I'm sorry, Sebastian said quietly. I should have prepared you better for how brutal that would be. It's not the brutality. I stared out the window at Manhattan passing by in streaks of light. It's realizing that people want to hurt me because of you. That I'm a target now. You've always been a target. From the moment you saved my life. His hand found mine again. But now you're also protected. Those are different things. Are they? Because right now they feel the same. We rode in silence back to the penthouse. Once inside, I went straight to my suite. Not Sebastian's room where I'd been spending most nights, but my own space. I needed to think without the distraction of his presence. Marcus's words kept echoing in my head. You're not just his nurse anymore. You're his partner. That makes you both incredibly protected and incredibly vulnerable. I'd thought I understood that. Thought I'd accepted the trade-off. But hearing Marco casually discuss threats to my life, seeing the reality of being important to someone like Sebastian, it hit different than abstract understanding. A knock on my door interrupted my spiral. Sarah? Sebastian's voice, careful and concerned. Can I come in? It's your penthouse. It's your room. He opened the door slowly, waiting for permission. May I? I nodded, and he entered, still wearing his suit from the meeting. He looked exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. The weight of his father's death, of consolidating power, of protecting me while running an empire. It was all written in the lines around his eyes. I'm scared, I admitted. Of what being with you means, of becoming a permanent target. I know. He sat beside me on the sofa. I'd be worried if you weren't scared. Fear means you understand the reality. Do you ever regret it, bringing me into your world? Every day. The honesty in his voice made me look at him. Every day I regret that you're in danger because of me. But I've never regretted you. That's a distinction without a difference. No, it's not. He turned to face me fully. Sarah, I could lock you in a golden cage. Maximum security, no exposure to threats, completely isolated from danger. Would you want that? No. Because being safe isn't the same as being alive. And what we have, this messy, complicated, dangerous thing, feels more alive than anything I've experienced. He took my hand. But it only works if you choose it. If you decide, with full knowledge of the risks, that it's worth it. And if I decide it's not worth it, then Marcus gets you out. New identity, new city, enough money to start over safely, no retaliation, no consequences. His eyes held mine. I told you before, I protect what's mine, even if that means protecting you from me. The offer was genuine. I could see it in his face. He would let me go if I asked. Would ensure my safety even as it destroyed whatever we'd built together. That certainty made the choice easier. "I'm not leaving," I said, "but I need something from you. Anything. I need you to teach me, not just self-defense, but all of it. How your world works. Who the players are, what the rules are. I can't navigate this if I'm ignorant. You want to understand the business. I want to be your partner, not just your weakness. If people are going to target me anyway, I might as well know why and how to protect myself." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or relief. "That will take time. Years, possibly. We have time." I leaned into him, letting his warmth ground me. "Don't we?" "Yes." He kissed the top of my head. "We have time." Over the following weeks, Sebastian kept his promise. He taught me the structure of his organization, the alliances and rivalries that defined his world. I learned about territories and percentages, about the legitimate businesses that funded the less legitimate ones, about the code that governed violence and the consequences for breaking it. I also continued my nursing duties, but they evolved. I became a consultant for the organization's medical needs, advising on healthcare logistics for their various enterprises, connecting with doctors who asked few questions, ensuring that everyone in Sebastian's network had access to care without exposure to law enforcement. It was gray area work, the kind of thing that would have horrified the idealistic nursing student I'd once been. But that student had also been buried in debt and despair, drowning in a system that valued credentials over compassion. This version of me, the one who split her time between legitimate medical care and more questionable consultations, felt more honest somehow. At least here, I understood the trade-offs I was making. Marcus's prediction came true. The Kozlov family did make a move against me. They got as far as the building's lobby before Sebastian's security neutralized the threat. I never even knew about it until after, when Sebastian informed me almost casually over dinner. "They won't try again," he said, like discussing a failed business merger, rather than an assassination attempt. The consequences were made clear. I didn't ask what those consequences were. Didn't want to know. But I noticed the tension in Sebastian's shoulders ease over the next few days, the way he seemed to breathe easier. One threat neutralized. Others would inevitably arise. That was the nature of this life. 3 months after Marco's meeting, 3 months after I'd chosen to stay, to fully embrace this complicated reality, Sebastian proposed. Not with flowers or a romantic speech, but in the practical way that defined us. "Marry me," he said while we were reviewing security protocols for an upcoming business trip. "Make it official. You're already my partner in everything that matters. This just formalizes it." I looked up from the documents spread across the dining table. That's possibly the least romantic proposal in history. Romance is overrated. Partnership is forever. He smiled slightly. "But if you need romance, I can arrange something elaborate and completely unlike us." "God, no." I laughed, surprising myself. "Practical proposals suit us just fine." "So that's a yes?" I thought about the terrified woman who'd been 3 months behind on rent, who'd saved a stranger's life and ended up here. Thought about everything I'd learned, everything I'd become. "That's a yes," I said. "To partnership, to forever, to all of it." He kissed me then, deep and thorough, and I tasted our future in it. Complicated, dangerous, sometimes morally ambiguous, but real, and ours. The wedding was small, just Victoria, Marcus, and a few key members of Sebastian's organization. We held it in the penthouse, with the Manhattan skyline as our witness. I wore a simple dress from a boutique Victoria recommended. Sebastian wore a suit he already owned. It was perfect. To new beginnings, Marcus toasted during the modest reception. And to the unlikely partnership of a crime boss and the nurse who saved him. "To partnership," Sebastian echoed, his eyes on mine. in all things. I raised my glass, meeting his gaze, to choosing each other every day. And that's what we did. Every morning we made the choice to stay, to fight, to navigate this dangerous world together. Some days were harder than others. Some threats felt insurmountable, but we were partners. In the medical suite and the boardroom, in crisis and in calm. I was no longer just the broke nurse from Queens who'd saved a stranger's life. I was Sarah Cross, Sebastian's partner, his wife, his choice, as he was mine. And if that made me a target, it also made me powerful. Protected. Part of something larger than my previous small life had ever allowed. I'd saved his life in a trauma bay on a chaotic Friday night. In return, he'd saved mine. From debt, from despair, from a future of endless struggle with no hope of escape. We were even, and we were just beginning. The end came on an ordinary Tuesday, in the most extraordinary way. I was reviewing medical supplies when Sebastian appeared in the doorway. "What would you say," he asked conversationally, "to having a permanent medical clinic? Legitimate, above board, serving the organization's families as well as the surrounding community." I stared at him. "That would cost millions." "I have millions, and you have vision." He moved into the room. "You wanted to make a difference when you became a nurse. To help people. This would let you do that, on our terms, in our world, but still making that difference. A legitimate medical practice, funded by not entirely legitimate sources. The gray area where we live best." His smile was knowing. "What do you say, Dr. Cross? Ready to build something that matters?" Dr. Cross. I'd never gone to medical school, would never have that title for real. But in Sebastian's world, I was that and more. Healer, partner, the woman who'd chosen this impossible life and made it work. "Let's do it," I said. "Let's build something that matters." And we did.